Hello and welcome to another episode of Veterans of Success, the chance where I get to speak to seemingly ordinary people with extraordinary stories. And today I've got with me Geoff Brown. Hello, Geoff. How are you doing?
I'm great, Joe, and thanks for having me on.
No, thanks for coming along. And right, so you know the score. There's no big fanfare for the common man or common woman. We just delve straight in, and during our conversation, it's about a big reveal. Right? You tell your story, I know your story, and I know we're going to have some great laughs and a lot of fun. So let's just jump straight in and tell me what was happening when you were a lad, long before you joined the military.
So I've always been a bit of a creative person, so I didn't fit in with normal traditional school education. Later found out in life that I was dyslexic, despite my dad being a college lecturer and my mum being a teacher. I didn't fit in with school. I absolutely hated school. I despised it with a passion.
And by the way, how did that fit in with your parents? Like your dad's a lecturer and your mum's a teacher, and here's you not respectfully not firing on all cylinders from the traditional point of view, if you get my meaning.
Well, I don't think they knew what the dyslexia was. It wasn't diagnosed till I was sort of like in my 30s, but they were very understanding and they both wanted me to go to college and go down the university route, which I absolutely hated. I later been, in my teens because of the dyslexia and because I didn't fit in with school, I ended up getting expelled from school and came out of school with zero qualifications. But, my dad still gave me 100% backing. And
Uh,
one of the things that I got into when I was a young lad, when I was like 13, 14 year old, was fishing, fly fishing. And I
uh,
started to make fishing flies and realized I was quite good at it. I've always been into the creative sort of, being a creative person. So I started making these fishing flies and then took them out to a local fishing tackle shop one day. And the guy looked at them and went, okay, I'll buy them off you. So then I
uh-huh.
thought I'd take them to another fishing tackle shop, and he was like, "Oh, I'll buy these off you as well." So him and myself and one of my friends who I started fishing with, we created our first business when we were both at school, when we were 14-year-old, making fishing flies. So by the time I was 16, I knew that I couldn't get anywhere in education, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to start my own business. So my dad helped us and backed us there, and we applied for a Prince's Trust grant. And at the time, we were the youngest people in the United Kingdom to get a grant from the Prince's Trust. Um, and then a couple of years later, about 18 months later, we met Prince Charles when he came to open the enterprise centre that our business premises were held in.
Wow, that's brilliant. And by the way, I mentioned before, not firing on all cylinders in the traditional sense. Now, I've got people I know and relatives who have dyslexia, and uh, I meant that most respectfully because I'm talking about the traditional way. Because I know back in the 70s or 80s that you were referring to, you might have been classed as thick or stupid back then because it wasn't an understood
Oh,
condition.
it wasn't classed, like back then teachers would tell you were thick or stupid, So my own self-belief was from a young age that I wouldn't really ever amount to anything because I was thick and I was stupid. So that did have a knock-on effect in my self-confidence for years and years and years afterwards. But yeah, there was no sort of diagnosis of stuff like that when in that time it was just like, oh, you're not performing, you can't tick the boxes, you must be stupid, you must have problems with learning,
Yeah.
and you not amount to anything.
So I mean, I suppose your parents and your dad, uh, in particular, you refer to as supporting you. That
Yeah,
was that was an important part of your growth, then, wasn't it?
it was. And I think the other thing was to realize that when you try to somebody tries to stuff you into a box, as with like the education system, and you absolutely hate it, you despise it, it's a struggle, and then you realize you can actually do something that makes you happy and brings you pleasure, which later went on to open that fishing tackle business, which we had for about 9 years before
Yeah.
the business split up. Then I actually did a job that I enjoyed. Yeah.
Because I feel so strongly about this, I know we're going to talk about what's the one tip you give to someone specifically now, though, because you just covered dyslexia and people get ADHD and other stuff, which could be classed as being a naughty boy or a naughty girl. It's just a condition.
Mhm.
which means neurodiversity. It means you learn differently. So and of course, not all children have parents who are supportive or maybe as supportive as your parents were. So what would you say to somebody who maybe hasn't had the same form of support and maybe listen to teachers who told them they were thick, right? What would you say? What would a good tip be from you?
I think from a personal experience is, you know, I don't have any, you know, I've got qualifications in photography, which I've, you know, I later went on to do in my career, and being a military photographer, I've got put through my qualifications there. But I think when you do something out of passion, something that comes from the heart, you get a lot more enjoyment, and the chances are you're going to succeed with something that you're passionate about more than something that you're told you've got to do. And quite often, a lot of people, and it's funny, like even within my own job, mentoring photographers around the world, there's so many people who've had really good paying jobs who've come to me, who've been doctors, been lawyers, accountants, and said, yeah, I've made a lot of money in 50 years or 40 years doing the job I want to do, but now I'm retired and I want to be a photographer, and I want to do something. They had a job that made them money, but it didn't make them happy, and it didn't give them that sense of fulfillment and enjoyment. And when you do something that is part of your passion, and especially from a creative's point of view, it can be really rewarding, you know, and then the money is an extra bonus.
Of course, yeah, that's a valid point. So it's all about finding something that you're passionate about and that you really love doing. That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think one of the purposes of this podcast, of course, is there are quite a few people who are stuck in jobs that they don't like. And the purpose of this podcast is to show that there's other stuff beyond that. And probably one of the biggest moves we make is when we transition from the military, which we'll come on to in a little bit, and
yeah,
how often we don't recognize the skills that we learned in the military and how useful they are in Civvy Street to whatever you
yeah,
want to back them to. So that's fantastic. So you're a bit of a naughty lad, right? From what people say. But
yeah,
as you meet Prince Charlie Boy, who is now King Charles,
yeah.
right? For the Prince's Trust, you have a bit of a chat with him, and you're doing all right in the business. And at this time, you get to what age, and you're thinking, what else is there?
So I got to, yeah, so I got to about 20, 24, 25 year old. We ended up closing the fishing business because sort of the business partnership split up, but we'd also suffered a series of break-ins to the premises over the years, which eventually we couldn't get insured. And so pulled out, you know, that business finished. I went to work in a camera shop because I was always interested in photography. That was one of my other great passions that came from fishing. So when I used to go fishing, I used to take great pictures of the, you know, sunrises and sunsets and being out in nature because I've always been an outdoorsy person.
And of course, the massive fish that you used to catch.
Oh, that massive that I used to catch. But I really got into photography. Went to Dixon's, and
Um,
started working in the Dixon's camera shop. And then one day I had a day off. I'd just come out of a relationship with a girlfriend who was like one of my first really long-term girlfriend, who we had a bit of a crazy relationship. We split up, and I'd gone to Newcastle to buy a new shirt. And I came out the shop, and I turned right, and I looked up, and I saw the picture of this guy in like a chef's uniform in this shop window. And I was looking at it, and it was a guy in a chef's uniform. Then I looked back and realized it was the Armed Forces recruiting office. Now, none of my family had been in the Armed Forces. My dad had been in um, who had done his 2 years national service in the RAF, but nobody had actually physically, from my family, had gone into the military. I didn't really know anybody in the military. And I just thought, you know what, I like cooking. I've always really been into cooking and baking and stuff like that. I'm going to go in and find out if I could be a chef in the military. God knows why I decided to do that. So I walked in, and this guy from the army came up and started asking us what I was interested in, what my hobbies were. And I says, well, I like fishing, I like being on the water. And then this guy and the desk next to him must have heard the water bit. And he says, "Oh, come and sit with me, mate. You want to join the Navy?" So that was it. I got taken over onto this desk. He started talking to his. I says, "Look, I wouldn't mind being a chef." He says, "Oh, we're not recruiting for chefs at the moment." He says, "But have you seen the film Top Gun?" And I went, "Yeah." He went, "Do you think it's cool?" I said, "Yeah, it's quite a cool film." He says, "Wouldn't it be great to be doing something like that?" So they obviously had quotas to fill then, because when I joined up, everybody had been given the same sales pitch. All these
Yeah,
people who
yeah.
joined my intake, and I ended up joining up as an aircraft engineer, which was way beyond me because I could barely put fuel in my car, never mind fix it. I was probably the worst engineer the military recruited, but I joined as an aircraft engineer, did 2 or 3 years as an aircraft engineer, and saw the opportunity to branch change and go into a specialist trade as a photographer, because it's not something you can actually join the military as. You couldn't join the army or navy as a photographer. You could join the RAF as a photographer.
Yeah. So you've got right. So so you discover that you're about as much use as a chocolate fireguard for engineering, and then
Definitely.
you think, right, photography's all right. So what was I mean? Because I share your passion, maybe not as much, certainly not as expert as you, and as experienced. I share your passion for capturing moments with the camera. So what was it that got you thinking about being a photographer in the Navy then?
Well, I was on a search and rescue base for about 3 years, and up in Scotland, and we had a photographer on the base, a resident photographer on the base, military Navy photographer, and I used to see him going out. He's very, very independent. He didn't seem to be getting told what to do by anybody. He went out and did his own stuff. He'd quite often be flying up in the helicopter, or he'd be out on speedboats and stuff. And then his work would always be on show on the corridors leading into the galley. And I'd look at these amazing pictures and think, oh my God, like how cool to be paid to do that. That's his hobby, that's his passion. So I ended up chatting to the guy, and he said, "Well, the photography branch in the Navy, you've really got to wait till somebody dies before you can replace them, because it's such a small branch. There's only about 70 or 80 people in the entire branch." Um, but he says once you get in, it's absolutely amazing. So I put together my portfolio, I made an application, and it just seemed to hit it right at the perfect time when there was a gap in, and they were recruiting for people at the time.
All right, so that's good. Yeah, because that makes sense with there not being many in that department for you to have to wait. So
Yeah.
what was the recruitment process like?
So a lot of it was done on your own. So it was done off your own back to show that you could actually, go and work. Because a lot of the military photographers' work is sort of like off your own back. So you're working unsupervised. So you had to put your own portfolio together. Then you had to go for a week sort of like interviews where you were given various assessments to go out and photograph different things and capture stories. So it was all about the way you interpreted something and the way you saw something. Because there's no wrong or right way to do it. It's how you creatively interpret that. Obviously, there's a right way to do it within, something's in
Yeah.
focus or something's exposed correctly. And funnily enough, at the end, you get an interview on the very last day. So I got the interview on the very last day, and they'd pretty much ripped all the photographs to bits that I'd put in over the course of the week. And they said, you know what, it says like on a photography score, you've scored quite poorly on this whole week. However, we like your creative approach, and we also like your enthusiasm and the fact you actually go off and do something with it. Prior to joining the military, I've been self-employed for 8 or 9 years. So the photography element is something we're gonna teach you. It's your enthusiasm,
Yeah.
and you know that you pick up, actually go and do something. That's what we're liking you. So it says for this reason, we're going to put you through onto the course. But you are a pretty poor photographer, but don't worry about that. We're going to train you how to do that.
And that's a good point because I know I've already touched on the fact about interchangeable skills and transferable skills. And when you leave the military or whatever sector of life you're in, the great skills are the soft skills like determination, enthusiasm, honesty,
Yeah, yeah,
integrity. the hard skills you can be taught, can't you?
Yeah, yeah,
And,
totally.
and you discovered that. And by the way, without because by this time we skipped. Well, I skipped it deliberately because I wanted to dive straight into the photography part. The fact is, though, and I know that basic training in the Navy is different than the Army. It's a little bit more difficult than the RAF, maybe not as difficult as the Army in a physical sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Um, what was going on though? Because you've been told you were a bit of a duffer at school, right? You'd set up your business. Now you if we not glossing over it, I think it's important that we just take a rain check and look like you set up your business. You were in business with someone else. You've been selling all this uh, fly fishing equipment. Well, the bait and what.
Yeah.
Not that's not the technical word, but
Yeah.
all the stuff, right? And then you had break-ins. I mean, at that point, just before you joined the Navy, you must have been feeling challenged maybe or really lost. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I think the problem with that I foresaw before going to the military, obviously, I didn't really experience this. So I went to Dixon's, and the job I got in Dixon's wasn't a fantastic job. I was just basically a sales assistant in a camera shop, and which I absolutely detested because we had to sell extended guarantees. That was a big push, try and get the insurance, try and get the warranty. I didn't enjoy the job whatsoever, but I loved cameras. That was something I was interested in. But even though I had all that experience, nearly 10 years of running my own business, um, and managing it on a day-to-day basis, that didn't really equate much to going into civilian life, trying to get a job off an employer, because an employer still then wanted to say, what A levels, what O levels do you have? Which college did you go to? And I didn't, so a lot of the employers looked at the past 10 years that I'd been in my own business as I'd been skiving for 10 years, basically. However, the military tend to look at that a slightly different way. That
Yeah.
that was an experience that they saw, like, oh, somebody, he has his own initiative, he can work unsupervised, he can set goals, and he can set tasks for himself. I constantly lived off to-do lists and given myself ultimatums to complete stuff, because ultimately if I didn't do that, then I didn't get paid you know
So how did that set you apart, if at all, when you joined the Navy and went for basic training?
I think, not sort of blow my own trumpet, but in my basic training class with the guys I was in, it really set me apart, because I was very organized when we had to do kit inspections. My kit was, people were coming up, oh, how, Jeff, do you do this? But I could see what we got on tomorrow, right? I need to achieve this before I get out of bed and have this. So I was always very, very structured, where a lot of the younger lads who were on, they'd had their mum doing everything for them for the best part of their life, and they couldn't think ahead, and they couldn't plan ahead. But because of, when you run your own business, you're always forward planning, you're always forward thinking, and I think that made it didn't make basic training easy, but it meant I didn't get in as much. I didn't get in as much crap as everybody else did. So I got away with less press ups and less talons off, because I foresaw what was going to happen.
Good, excellent. So you go from that, you get your first posting on a ship, then you decide you don't want to be an engineer. You've just been told that your photography skills aren't up to much. The thing is that what they do like about you is your character and what you brought to the table, other than the photography skills.
Yeah,
So you're having a bit of a roller coaster so far, aren't you, with ups and downs, uh, and you get the break to be the
yeah.
photographer, what you really, really love doing. So what happens then? Where do you go? Where did you get your training? Where did you acquire your knowledge?
So the first part of the training is it's quite intensive. It was 28 weeks, 28 weeks with 26 exams at RAF Cosford in the Midlands.
Oh, I
And
know that. Yeah, I know
yeah, and
that.
I was on course with five army lads. So I was the only sailor, and there was five army lads on my course. So we had a good bit of banter. It was fun, and it was a great course. You know, we did everything, all different styles of photography. And it was very, very hands-on, and it was also three strikes and you're out. So if you failed three of your exams, then that was it, you were off course. And at the end of the 28 weeks, I just scraped through and passed the course. And then my first posting was on the nuclear submarine base at Faslane Naval Base up in
All right,
Scotland.
Cosline, yeah.
Uh, and in typical sort of military style. So I went up there, and my boss said to me, "Right, you've got to shadow a qualified photographer for 2 to 3 weeks. We'll keep an eye on your work." And every day I had to go back and show my boss the photographs that I'd taken, and he could see that, you know, gradually improving, understanding what to do, seeing how this guy worked, and copying him. And then at the end of the 3 weeks, it come to, so it was like midweek, it was like the Wednesday. The boss had been looking at my pictures, and he says, "Geoff," he says, "I think you're ready now to go out and do your first job." And he says, you live in Sunderland, don't you?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Right." He says, "Go finish tonight. Instead of finishing on Friday, finish tonight, Wednesday night, go home, have a couple of days to get yourself prepared for your first job." And he says, "And then he says, I want you back on base on Saturday evening, because your first job will be Prince Philip's photographer at the Commando Memorial at Speenbridge for the Remembrance Parade." So the first job I had on my own, unassisted, as a military photographer, was Prince Philip's photographer. So I got a royal job on my first ever job. And he says, he says, "Not to put too much pressure on you," he says, "but Prince Philip hates photographers. Um, so you're gonna have your work cut out." And that day I made a mistake that I never made again in my entire career. So I got up there, and I arrived nice and early. I was, you know, cleaning my lenses, checking all my kit, getting ready. I had two cameras. I was shooting film, and I was also shooting the odd few things on digital, because we were just starting to try digital cameras then. But the Navy was still pretty much 80% film. So Prince Philip arrived, and I was getting loads of pictures of him greeting the dignitaries, and I wanted to get some pictures with the beautiful Scottish hillside in the background, because Speenbridge has got some breathtaking views of the Scottish mountains. And I thought, you know what, I've taken some amazing pictures. I've taken loads of amazing pictures. Then it suddenly dawned on us, yeah, I have actually taken quite a lot of pictures, and I haven't changed film yet. And then I looked down at the counter on top of my camera, and I hadn't put a film in.
Ah,
So
hey, I think that would have been you would have got an award for that, and it wouldn't have been a nice award, would it?
But luckily, I managed to blag my way through it. Luckily, I'd taken a few on digital that sort of like covered a little bit of that time, and then I just sort of like made up for it for the rest of the event. Running around like an idiot trying to get as many pictures as I could. But that was a mistake I never made again.
Yeah, and how did Prince Philip take to you?
He didn't, basically.
Did
Yeah, I'd photographed other royals in my time as a military photographer, but he just didn't interact. You know, if where like other a lot of dignitaries or other members of the royal family might actually be aware that they're being photographed and hold the position for a little bit longer to give you a chance to
he?
do it. But Philip just didn't have time for photographers, whether they were paparazzi or whether they're military. It didn't make any difference. The only difference that we had is we could get places that the paparazzi couldn't, because we were literally 10 foot in front of him. Yeah.
Yeah, so he didn't differentiate between you and the paparazzi. He just didn't like any.
Oh, he didn't like any camera in his phone. Yeah.
Right. So that would have taught you to use the three words we know in the military of improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Definitely.
Definitely. So you're flying along in your military career as a photographer, and you did a fair bit of time, didn't you? Uh, and what was going on towards the end of your career in your mind about moving on and wanting to do something different?
So, funny enough, I took a bit of a different direction, because at that time the military was getting very much into what's called image analysis, which is analyzing imagery from satellites and drones and reconnaissance photographs. And the intelligence services and the intelligence part of the military realized some of the best people who could analyze photographs were photographers because we had a good eye for stuff and that attention to detail. So a gap came up, and I was basically pushed by my boss to go and apply to become an image analyst, which I did, and then I had to go to Chick Sands Army base,
Yeah.
which was old American Air Force base, I believe, and did 6 months down there doing my image analysis intelligence qualifications. Passed out of that course, and then I went to RAF Brampton to a place called Jarrick, which was Joint Aerial Reconnaissance and Intelligence Centre. And I was an image analysis for 2.5 years there. But while I was there, loads of people were coming in asking if we could do photographs of the kids and the dogs, and oh, my daughter's getting married. Could you do our wedding? So it was a land-based job. Weekends were fairly safe. I wasn't going to be sent away anywhere, so I could take on the odd wedding now and then. So this sort of led to us thinking. I was based with another lad from Sunderland, Kevin Darash, who was also a Navy photographer, and we came to the idea that we could set a little business up here and start making money from photography, and it actually started to take off. So Kev was married with 2 kids. I'd had a motorcycle accident. So at the time I was military downgraded. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to see if I can build this business up. And then if I can, then I'm going to come out. And that's what I did. We started building the business up, so that it began to take off. And then that was it. So I put in to come out and leave the military. And then about a year later, Kev followed me. So I went out, set the business up. Kev helped me on weekends. And then a year later, he came out and joined the business with me.
And how long did that go for?
So we had that business we set that up in 2004, and that business lasted until 2014.
Right, so that's a fair old time, isn't it?
Yeah. So we ended up with 4 photography businesses and 1 sort of training business. Kev still does the school photography, and then obviously I took the training onto what I do now, which is the marketing side for photographers.
Got you. And how did the transition go? I mean, you've been given the boot up the backside, I suppose, by the fact that the business was going well, and you had a motorcycle accident which made you, well, downgraded you medically, I suppose, in some way, yeah. So what was the transition like? Because now you've just had another kick in the nether region, sort of, although I suppose you're boosted by the fact that the photography business was going all right.
So luckily we had a really good boss as well at the time when we were working with the intelligence services, and he was like, "Oh, if you got any jobs coming in," he says, I'll let you go so you can go and do the jobs if you've got to go and do a wedding." And also he's keen for us to get on as many courses as we could while we're still in the military. So we got on quite a few business sort of courses and design courses that were going about at the time. And then when it came to the resettlement money, instead of spending my money on more photography training, I thought I'm going to spend that money on understanding about marketing and understanding about running a business, because I knew the basic, I knew photography quite well. Okay, I hadn't photographed many brides and grooms and kids. We'd been photographing sort of military personnel, but it still equates to the same thing. And I thought one of the big things that we can get and we can bring forward is, in order to do a really successful wedding shoot, you have to be great at dealing with people and organizing people and getting them to where you want to be. And you also need to be good at organizational element, and you also need to be good at communication. And those are 2 really good aspects that we had from the military, good timekeeping, attention to detail, organizing people, and communication. So that was a natural passover into the wedding side of things. And then when we developed the brand for the business, we said one of our catch lines was, "It's the same care and attention that we put into photographing the Queen and members of the royal family that we'll put into photographing you on your big day. And we said that we're both, both ex-military photographers, and that went down a storm with brides' mothers. Oh, we've got the two lads who's photographed the Queen and the royal family. They're going to be our photographer, my daughter's photographer for the day. And then, so yeah, a lot of those skills were really, really good and transferable across to being a wedding photographer.
Yeah, and that adds a bit of kudos, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
you can't, not many people can say, oh, our wedding photographer, actually, they used to regularly photograph the Queen and the royal family. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
that's got to have a bit of pull, hasn't it? So you mentioned that Kevin still does the school photograph. So at
Yeah.
some point then, I'm assuming you split up.
Yeah, so in 2014, 2000, well, start of 2014, I decided I want to buy a pub. Bit of a stupid idea, but I decided to buy, I'd always thought about buying a food pub. And so I invested in this food pub that was in County Durham. And the idea was that this food pub would also be great for a wedding venue. So we'd be able to hold wedding reception dinners there. So it would be a good sort of like side thing to the photography as well. So I ended up buying the food pub and in plowing all my sort of life savings into this food pub. And within 12 months, it had collapsed. I'd lost the £120,000 that I'd invested in, and there was about £60,000 worth in debt, and with no potential way of actually getting out of it because I still had about 15 years left on the lease, and the brewery weren't going to let me go. So at that point, I've really hit sort of an absolute rock bottom. I hit a very low point. Tried to take my own life, managed later to get out of the lease thanks to somebody else who was in the pub game and realized that the lease I had was what was called not a fully repairing lease. So I actually owned all the fixtures and fittings in the pub, but the brewery didn't realize that because it was a really old lease. So I threatened to rip all the fixtures and fittings out of the pub and all the door frame and the bar and set fire to it in the car park if they didn't let me out the lease because I could do because it belonged to me. So the brewery ended up caving in and let me out the lease, and that was it. I moved away to Northumberland. I wanted to get away from Sunderland and from Durham, where I felt like I'd been a massive failure. And I started from scratch again. So I moved up to Northumberland and started a new business up.
Now, there's an interesting point that I want to just hold fire on because it's a memory now, right? And I don't want you to go back there. I have no intention that. What I do want to point out though is, so at that stage, you must have felt pretty low, and you admittedly say
Yeah.
you nearly committed suicide, and just before you committed suicide, what what did you think? What was the future looking like for you? Because I know, and by the way, if you're listening and this brings back any memories for you, please seek help. I mean, Geoff, you're going to go into it a bit more and what it was that brought you through it to the other side, because that is as low as it goes, really.
Yeah, yeah. So at the time I was in this pub and we had about 18 staff, but I was in there by myself. I felt like the staff didn't like me. I had staff stealing from me. I was in an area that I didn't really fit in either. I don't think that the business I got, because I was an outsider to the local town, I wasn't really classed as a local. It was an old pit village in County Durham, and everybody knew everybody, but I didn't really fit in. So I felt like I was struggling pretty much on my own. I've always been one of these people who doesn't reach out to other people anyway and sort of deals with my own problems. But because I was trapped within this lease as well, it got to the stage where every day I was just losing hundreds and hundreds more pounds. Like every week there was another couple of £1,000 further
Mm.
in debt, and the bills were mounting up. The VAT bill was mounting up, and I didn't see any way out. I think the only thing that stopped me really, really trying and to end everything was the fact I had a 7 or 8 year old little girl at the time. So and luckily, as I say, I managed to get out there, and I came back. I came up to Northumberland. Now, at that point, I was at a very dark point in my life. But when I look back at it now, I look back at it as being one of the best things that ever happened. Because from that, I changed complete direction. I started an online business, which allows me to set my hours and work when I want. Work with photographers all around the world. My business also gets me to travel, and because of that business, I've now written 4 best-selling books, which is something I never thought I'd be able to do being dyslexic.
Yeah.
But over the years of having this business, I've built a fantastic relationship with my daughter, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I'd had the pub. So even if the pub had succeeded a bit, and things had went well, I don't think I would have achieved what I've achieved now. I probably would have been stressed a bit. I would have been dealing with constant ups and downs of running a busy food pub and staff not turning in. I wouldn't have had the quality that I've had with my I probably wouldn't have traveled anywhere near as much as I've had. So I look back at that now as being the best failure I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
And I still see, things happen for a reason. I couldn't see it then, it was really,
Yeah.
really dark, horrible time. But I managed to turn things around, and it was that having that belief and reading, listening to a lot of positivity books, downloading loads of stuff on audio, and every morning getting up early, getting out there, listening to books about people who've been through similar stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and then realizing my potential, setting some goals down and doing something every single day towards.
Yeah, and I know from personal experience how tough it can be running a pub because I bought a workers club that had gone bust back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And you being on your own, the difference I had was I had the mother and father-in-law who were the mother and father-in-law at the time, who
Yeah.
helped with the bar, but my skills were DJ, doorman, and finance, being a independent financial advisor. So I used those skills and it was still tough when I'm not on my own. So you doing that on your own with 14 staff, because we had about that number of staff as well, must have been really tough. So well done. I take my hat off to you for being able to do that. And more importantly, because we only had this for 2 years, turn it around from going bust and turn it around into a business that was okay. By the way, the lady who bought it off us, I said, we've sweat and toiled and barred all the bad people, do not let them back in. And guess what she did? She let them back in. Yeah, and within 12 months, she'd gone bust, right? Which I'm not happy about, of course. So it's dead easy to just tip it over the edge. So congratulations on recognizing that, and of course developing such a lovely relationship with your daughter. So here's a question, keeping on the subject of success. And we're going to develop the conversation into talk about what you're doing now and how you've been involved with camera companies and big names. What's the secret of your success? What would you put it down to?
I would say two things. Having a physical idea of where I want to go. So like an exact roadmap, and no matter how big those initial end goals are, not worrying about it, because thing is, every goal is achievable, just some goals take longer to achieve than others. And the other key thing is it takes just as much effort to achieve something average as it does to achieve something absolutely amazing and awesome and unbelievable. It's just doing the same thing for a little bit longer. So right back at the very beginning when I was struggling with these, the depression and being up every morning, listening to these audiobooks and listening to, so many famous people who like failed and succeeded over and over again, because we all think of people like, athletes and movie stars and rock stars and successful entrepreneurs as just being successful. But a lot of those people have had some really deep, dark pasts and, failed, lost everything, started up again, and that gives you hope. You realize that it's just normal. This is just all part of the learning process of life. So right at the very beginning, I started setting goals, which were massive, like absolutely massive, considering I was £60,000 in debt and I just got out from the pub.
Yeah.
The goals of traveling internationally and delivering workshops around the world, being a brand ambassador for one of the biggest sort of camera manufacturers in the world, working closely with all the professional photography associations, all of those, writing my own books and also writing for magazines, all of those were big goals that were massive, like way off where I was at that present time. But every single one of those I've achieved.
Which congratulations, which is absolutely amazing. And I know that's a word that's regularly used when I say it. I mean it, right? And what I do want to point out though is that you were only able to set those massive goals because of the pain you've been through before, if that makes sense. Because you couldn't say you want to be an ambassador for the great camera company if you knew nothing about cameras, could you?
Yeah, yeah,
And if you hadn't been told that you were a crap photographer in the
yeah,
Royal Navy, or maybe they weren't so good, whatever
yeah,
term they used, right? And the point I'm making there is that, you know, because I believe in smarter goals, not just smart, because the A at the end stands for attitude. So,
yeah,
you've got specific, measurable, time bound, and what have you. But I put the A at the end for attitude because you've also got to have the correct attitude to achieve it, haven't you?
yeah, totally. And right back to listening to those audiobooks. I remember listening to one or two audiobooks that had said, these people who'd failed in life suddenly decided, right, I'm going to write the goals and I'm going to go really big. I'm going to think, what's the biggest I can go? So I thought, right, and I wrote down my list. And one was to deliver workshops around the world because I love travel. The idea of getting paid to deliver workshops in America, Canada, Africa,
Yeah.
that would be great. To be closely involved with all the professional photography associations in Great Britain and abroad and some abroad as well to help and mentor other photographers to write a book. I'd always wanted to write a book. And at the time, I wanted to be an ambassador for Canon cameras because I had a Canon camera. And so I wrote all those down and I printed them out and I stuck them on my wall. And I always do that. Even now, like while I'm talking to you, I can see my goals ahead of me.
Yeah.
They're printed out. And there's actually 15 on the wall in front of me, my big 2025 goals. So because I kept these front of mind all the time, I was always doing something towards it. I was always looking out for opportunity, looking for, oh, if I connect with this person, he might be able to help me along this route to get towards, So I've always had that roadmap and that direction. And then things just started to happen. I got, approached to write for a few magazines, and then I got to do a few webinars with professional photography associations. Then I got approached by Olympus Cameras to become an ambassador for them. Then I got, over the years, then I became president of the BIPP, the British Institute of Professional Photography, which is the oldest professional photography association in the world. Then I wrote my first book, then my second book, my third book, my fourth book, and they all became bestsellers. But they all came from the original ideas that I had. It didn't happen overnight. It took about 5 or 6 years, but I always kept working towards those. So it's not that it's all about taking steps in the right direction and just little steps every single day. Some of them happened a lot quicker than I imagined. Some of them took a lot longer to achieve than I ever thought they would, but I got there in the end.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I say this repeatedly
Mm.
that, all these people who are doing TikTok and Instagram and all this stuff where you can be an overnight success. And it's interesting, even on the fastest track, you mentioned 5 years, but we go back to when you went bust or nearly,
Yeah,
and how to get out of a lease. I mean, that was back in 2014. So, I mean, of 2014, 15. So like
yeah,
that was 10 years ago. And I say to
yeah,
people, look, you want to be financially free or whatever. You want to be wealthy, which can be health as well as
yeah,
psychological, mental, physical. It's going to take you a while. Do
yeah,
you, unless you've got something that's just going to go viral, right,
yeah.
overnight. Becoming financially free is going to take you a little bit longer than
Mm.
2 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing, the making money, that can actually come about a lot quicker than it could, when I first started my fishing business up. You know, when I started
Yeah.
my fishing business up, which was when I was, 1985, they always say, the first year you make a loss, second year you break even, third year you make a profit. You know, now we're in an age where it's social media. You know, if you were visible, I have this saying that visibility is credibility. Credibility leads to more authority, and more authority leads to more opportunity. So for me, one of the biggest things is every single day to show up online, interact with other people's content, post my own content, be seen. Because the more visible I am, the more credible I become. The more credible, the more numbers I get. You know, I've got probably, I think, something like 65,000 followers on LinkedIn. I've got another 40,000 on Facebook, so with a bigger audience comes more opportunity. And because you have that number in authority. Now, nobody starts a social media platform and gets 10,000 followers overnight. Yeah, everybody gets their first like, everybody gets their first follower, but the people who do it well are the ones who keep that consistency, keep showing up and then it snowballs. It's the compounding effect. And from that comes a lot more opportunity.
Just say that again. Visibility to credibility, credibility to
Authority and authority to opportunity. So the more, you don't have to, the more people say, oh yeah, I recognize this person. I see that, and what I do is I don't try to sell. I try to give value and put myself out there. So you become sort of, it's about being liked and trusted, isn't it, as well? So
yeah, yeah,
if you try and sell all the time on your social media, people aren't going to like it because they don't know the person behind the social media. And you're not going to be trusted because people feel like they're just you're trying to make money out of them. So when you like put out inspirational stuff, you make fun of yourself. I've been posting the past month about mince pies, Christmas mince pies, and I've been reviewing them and put them on my LinkedIn, and people have been like, oh, Geoff, I can't wait to find out what your next mince pie is. It's about having that ability to put yourself out there, be fun, be inspirational, share content, build your network, and then you become more credible. That leads to more authority. When you've got more authority, the more opportunity comes your way. I had
yeah,
a message today from a brand said, "Oh, look, we know you're speaking at this particular conference in January. We'd like to offer you X amount of pounds if we can sponsor you for being there." Now, the only reason they're reaching out to give me money is because I've grown that number of followers and I've grown that authority within the
yeah,
industry.
yeah.
So it's the authority that leads to that opportunity. But I got that authority by being visible and becoming more credible because I wasn't trying to sell to people.
Yeah. Which reminds me actually about being visible. You've prompted me to just do another 12 days of Christmas. Now, unlike the advertisers who start 12 days before Christmas, right? The 12 days of Christmas actually starts on the 25th, right? And it goes after that. So I'm going to do something because I've done it for the last 3 years. And I'm probably going to come up with something else this year, which will be a little bit different. So that's a great point that actually about how you build a following and how you build value. Because I was taught, and I always go by this really because I know, like you, I love giving value. Right, this podcast is designed specifically to give value, and and I think that too many people want to start with the sale, don't they?
Mhm.
Whereas isn't it much better to give 90% of the stuff away for free, or give it in a membership site or something, and only charge for the 10% because it's the 10% that sort of pushes it over the line, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the most common messages I get, and I work with photographers in over 25 different countries now around the world, is I get a message off a photographer and it'll start like this. Hi Geoff, hope you're well, mate. I've been following you now for about six or 9 months. I love
Yeah,
your content. Um, I know what you do. I'd like to jump on a call because I'm interested in working with you. Right. So I don't get questions like, how much do you charge for your mentoring program? Right. Because my prices are on my website. What I've done is I'm giving loads and loads of stuff away so they see the value in me.
yeah,
And by me giving that stuff away and being genuine and putting myself out there, it gets that likability bit. But by the time the people reach out to me, they're already pre-sold
Yeah.
anyway. You know what I mean? So they've got like,
Yeah.
wow, you know, he gives all this stuff away. He's a genuine guy. He's always there to try and help us. If I'm going to choose a mentor, it's going to be him. It's
Mm.
not going to be somebody who's trying to ram something down my throat and get me on a sales call. So usually when I jump on one of my free consultation calls with a client, you know, I have a good turnover. Is the fact that, yeah, right, how do I sign up? I'm already pre-sold. You know,
Yeah.
this is just a little tick box of finding out how the actual program works. So it's that selling without selling. That's how I do it. I sell without selling.
And it's good because selling is service, isn't it, really? If
Yeah, yeah,
you can offer the service and serve people, well then they're going to want in. Now
yeah.
we talked about success and we talked about how you get from A to B. What I want to know is how you deal with when you get from A and then you're stuck with A. What I mean by that is failure. How do you
Yeah.
deal with failure? Because you've experienced that a few times as well, like me.
Oh yeah, I've had loads of failures, loads of things have not worked, or loads of things I've spent money on and gone, well, that was an absolute waste. You know, I mean, I remember when we had the wedding business spending £4,000 on a radio advert campaign and we got nothing, absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I've
You know,
done that as well. Yeah, yeah.
but I, I always say that failure isn't really failure because every single bit of failure gives you something back in return, something that you can work on. And if you think about it, no, there's that thing where people say, oh, well, I want to make sure I get it perfect first. There's no such thing as perfect because it might be even perfect in your eyes, but then in your customer's eyes, it might not be. They'll be able to give you some feedback. And that's why companies do soft launches. That's why companies have beta testing software because they think they've got it pretty much all right, but they want to put it out to the public. And then the public will tweak it and change it. Um, so for me, every little failure just gives me a chance to say, right, well, I'm going to relook. Yeah, that was okay, but if I take that bit and repackage it up with this and then change this element, then put it back out there, see how it does from that.
That's a great point. And I just want to pick you up on something. Not like I'm being one of your school teachers that says you're stupid, right? It's the one where it's the phrase where you said that radio advertising was a waste. Now, and now as I'm picking you up on it, you'll get where I'm coming from straight away.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
then later on you said it was good, effectively research and development. So it wasn't a waste, was it? Even though at the time you thought bugger,
yeah,
that
yeah.
was, if you know what I
So,
mean.
you know, with that radio advert, that led us on to do something very different. That was what we created was like basically what I call like a commission-based incentive.
Yeah,
So we had an idea because with the radio advertising, we've run a little competition as well, where people were getting, you know, like the runners-up would get a voucher through the radio where you get like £100 to use against the cost of your wedding photography for the
yeah.
day. The reason is instead of using the video, why don't we go to bridal shops and we'll create little promotions with bridal shops and give them vouchers, and then when they hand these vouchers out, if anybody books with that particular voucher and reference code, would give the person in the bridal shop £50 or £100 for the referral when that bride books. We started that. That got to a point where certain bridal shops were getting us 40, 50 bookings
Oh wow.
in a year. So we stopped doing any form of advertising. And yeah, I loved taking £200-300 down to a bridal shop because if I give them £200 or £300, I'd probably made £6,000 or £7,000 in wedding bookings. You know, and I always remember one girl coming to us and she booked our top wedding package, which at the time was I think £2,800. And she worked in this bridal shop and she says, Geoff, I want to book you for this. I want to book you guys to do my wedding, but I don't want to pay for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you 28 bookings in the next 18 months because our wedding was 18 months in the future. And she got us 24 bookings. She worked in this bridal shop and she just recommended the hell out of us. But instead of taking that £100 commission every time, she says, just knock it off my wedding photography bill at the end.
Ah,
So she
that's resourceful.
so
Yeah.
she left. She was left with 400 quid left to pay, and I just went, scrub the £400. You've been fantastic, you know. But that just showed you that, and we never would have put that together if we hadn't failed with the advert because it was the idea of some of the adverts that win a competition and a runners-up price that we then created what we call the joint venture with the bridal shop.
Yeah.
So something came out of failure.
So I'm pleased I pulled you on that because that
Yeah,
brought that point out. So the moral of that story is nothing's a waste, nothing's a failure.
yeah,
It's all first attempt in learning, which
yeah,
you
yeah,
get straight away. So, you know, when you were born, right? On the day you were born, you knew everything about photography, everything about business, and everything about whatever you needed to know, didn't you? Marketing. No.
no,
I would imagine you knew diddly squat. So during the time from when you were told you were stupid at school, and then your father and your mother took you under the wing, which of course they would, and
yeah,
then the people you had that helped you in the Navy or in Dixon's or wherever, and the Prince's Trust,
yeah.
and the comments that Prince Charles made. What I'm coming to is how important do you think having a good coach and mentor is?
Really, really important. So, I mean, my job is I mentor photographers around the world. I train them in the business aspect side of things. And I've been doing this for what, 7 or 8 years now. But every year I sign up with at least one or two coaches or mentors to learn something else. And one of the things which is on my goal sheet right in front of me is to crack Amazon ads for authors. So Amazon advertising platform is quite hard. It's not like it's not as simple as Facebook ads. But there's a guy I see him do loads of stuff. He gives content away for free. A guy called Brian Cronin, and he is known in the yeah, he's known in the industry as being the best person for Amazon ads. So what am I going to do next year? I'm going to get a coach, a mentor to train me to be good
Yeah.
because I know that will be good within my own business. So every year I look at, I've got a huge following now on LinkedIn. I've written a LinkedIn book for photographers, but 7 or 8 years ago, I did a program with a coach on LinkedIn. So I got a mentor to teach me how to become an expert on LinkedIn. So nobody is born knowing everything. You have to learn off other people and then interpret that into your business. So I will never stop having mentors or coaches in, from a business side of things, but also from a personal side of my life, like fitness and stuff like that. It's all about development, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. And interestingly enough, I've just embarking on a YouTube campaign to use that for what I do because I've got loads of content, video
Yeah,
content, and I'm really going to structure it to be able to deliver on YouTube and really maximize that, as well as the LinkedIn that I do,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
how we met. Um, so social networks, and I don't just mean like social media networks, I mean like
yeah.
social networks where business networking and also business networks as well. How have you used that in the past, and how are you going to use it in the future, and how important do you think that is to personal and business development?
I think it is really essential and it is really important, but it's also making sure that you have the right network because there is a lot of these networks out there. Social media is fantastic, but again, you've got to have the right. Any social media is about telling stories and about connecting with the right type of people. So first of all, your profile needs to be right. It needs to be not about you, about what you can do for your customer, and your customer needs to be in the right place. Now, next year, one of the other things I want to do next year, because I've heard that it's really, really good for authors, is I want to get on TikTok because BookTok is supposed to be brilliant for authors. So I'm going to learn a new social media platform next year, which is going to be TikTok. But then coming to the in-person networking, I've done loads of these sort of business breakfasts and BNIs and stuff like that over the years, and quite a few of them just haven't worked because they're not the right sort of people. They're not the right ideal client type. But then I've done other networking events where it's absolutely taken off and it's been amazing because the people who value what I do and are prepared to pay a premium price for doing it. So if you're going to join any sort of face-to-face networking event or group, are they your right ideal client? Are you the perfect fit for them? Are you going to find your customers there? And are they going to be people who are going to pay value for what you actually do, not people who are just buying on price? Because you can go to a lot of these business breakfast network meetings and not meet the right type of people. They're not going to have your ideal clients in there.
No.
And sometimes it's a case of picking up the existing business where it is and just trying to move it into a different place physically. So I've got a headshot photographer I've been working with, and he's effectively lifted his business up and moved it over to the right place. He's got in with the right people, so that he's working with people who are successful entrepreneurs, business owners who really value his photography and pay a premium, where like not people who are like the Facebook marketplace type people or the Groupon tire kickers who want anything for nothing. He's now got the right network of people, and he's very valued within that community. But there are other communities who won't value him and won't pay £100 for what he does,
Yeah.
where he's pay £2,000 for what he does.
Yeah, and I love that term, tire kicker, because I remember having a light aircraft, and the tire kickers when we were selling it, right? The tire kickers would come around and literally kick the tire. I said,
Yeah,
hang on, mate, you're not buying the tire; it's the whole
yeah,
aircraft.
yeah.
Just, and bring them down to the point. So it's, yeah, I think that's entirely important about being in the right place with the right product and the right people, because
Yeah.
if you don't get that right, it can really mess you up and bring you to a point where you start feeling dejected and demotivated.
Yeah.
Really, you've got everything you need, you're just not in the right place, if that makes sense.
And working with, I there's a big thing for like, creative people, and people say, oh no, you should never do a job for free. And I say, no, that I totally disagree with that. But you do a job for free for the right person. So I'll give you an example of this. Years ago when we set up our commercial, because we had like 4 different photography businesses and a training business. When we set up a commercial business, we went to the local Marriott hotel and said, because we were aiming at like hospitality trades and restaurants and building businesses, so we wanted some good names on there. So we went down to the Marriott hotel and says, look, we'd like to do some photographs. We'd like to offer you the option of this particular package of photography worth X amount of pounds. So tell them the value of it and say, in exchange, we'll give you that for free. We'll give you that for free in exchange for a review, and also that we can use those images in our brochure and on our website. So the guy at the Marriott, bit our hand off because we were giving him like £1,500 to £2,000 worth of photography for free. We could use the images on our website. We had a review from him as well, a testimonial. Now, how powerful do those images look? Because you've got the images with the Marriott brand in there, and people are standing there with the Marriott badges on. They've got the Marriott clock behind them and that stuff like that. Or you'd gone and done a shoot for a guy who runs Joe's Bed and Breakfast. It doesn't have the same authority and standing as the Marriott on your website. So yes, go and do a job for somebody for free, but only if they can bring you that authority that we talked about and that credibility, and you can get something from it. And they've got a big following as well. Don't go out doing jobs for people for free if you're not going to get anything back from them.
And you've just burst my bubble. I'm not going to set up that bed and breakfast place. That's what I was thinking of doing. Or I won't call it Joe's Bed and Breakfast. So I could speak all day to you, and because I know we share a lot of similar views, values, and experiences. What I'd like to know is, could be someone who's not left the military yet, could be someone who's left the military and doing really well or not so well, or we get someone who's just in business and wants to know how to just get better results. What's the one, if you can narrow it down to one, what's the one big valuable tip you could give someone to just get to a better place than where they are now?
I think definitely is consistency. It's that visibility and that consistency, but consistency doing the right thing. So if you decide where you want to be, you then break that bigger goal down into something that's easily achievable or something you can do. And sometimes it's not as direct as you think, so you might have a goal to make 250,000, and then that your ideal clients are in a certain place, right? So you can go out and try and pick off those clients one by one, or you could say, hang on a minute, I'm going to produce a really good article and approach a magazine that already serves my ideal clients and seeing if they want this article in this magazine. So then that article gets published, that gives you authority. People who read the magazine then come over and follow you and come to you. One of the things that I do is I do about 40 to 50 podcasts a year for photography podcasts or business podcasts.
Yeah.
Because when I get on a podcast, I get more followers, I get more authority and credibility. I will sell more books, but ultimately some of those people will actually come and buy my program and sign up with me. So I'm not chasing the financial, I'm chasing a different goal. But that other goal of getting on 50 podcasts a year or writing for 10 magazines a year will give me the financial reward anyway. Because as a byproduct of doing those things, the money will, it's hard to chase the money. It's hard to go and say, right, I want to chase 250,000 because you need a way to get that money. You can't just go and drag people off the street and say, spend it. So instead of setting a financial goal, have a financial target, but then look at things you can do on a daily basis that will get you to that. And that might be writing a blog a week or posting to social media every single day or reaching out to people who already serve the people that you want to work with.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the best. And that's that consistency that will ultimately produce the results.
Thank you for that. And we've talked about on a few occasions during our chat about transferable skills from the military.
Mhm.
And from what you know now, what and how valuable do you think you feel the skills are that you learned in the military, and what are they?
I think definitely that organizational skills, timekeeping is is essential. So timekeeping, organizational skills, being able to think independently as well, and also adapt to something that might just fling a spanner in the works halfway way you through something. And the other way is also to be able to keep calm and not panic, to stand back and assess the situation and go, right, well, why don't we just do this instead? And I've had that loads of times over my career as a photographer where something's gone completely wrong. You could be on photographing a wedding or you could be on a big commercial shoot and something goes wrong. You're like, right, hang on a minute, don't panic. How can we deal with this?
And when you were saying that, my mind went back to basic training when we were doing the first aid section of the training, and the guys who were the casualties were just told to scream as loud as they could from the ablutions. And we run in, we see someone running around with a big gash in their hand, someone with a break and everything. And then what we didn't see was the person who was unconscious in the toilet cubicle. And
Yeah.
that taught us a great lesson about just being able to assess the situation and do not panic.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
actually the feedback we got was he's dead.
Yeah. 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 Look at the bigger picture, assess everything, and yeah. And it's for me, I've always been quite calm. And I think when you are calm, you can judge things a lot better.
Mm,
Um, and I think a lot of people do value, especially, I mean, especially in the United States, but even more so now in the US, in the UK than used to be. We didn't have a lot of value, I suppose, 15, 20 years ago in the UK, where the US has always valued their armed services. But I think now there is that credibility that, people ex-military. I think the other thing it is not be too military when you speak to people,
yeah,
because otherwise you speak in a different language to them. So speak as you would to a normal civilian friend. You're not speaking to one of your mates that you're in the military with. But
no,
people do respect that we do have that. We go through stuff and we deal with stuff differently than other people, but we have something that ultimately means we're good at timekeeping, we're good at listening, we're good at organizational stuff, and quite very calm under pressure as well.
right. So you've already touched on quite a bit of it and shared what your goals are for 2025. So what's next for you?
For me, more traveling, more delivering workshops. I've just in the past month or so, I've managed to secure a couple more international workshops, one being in South Africa, Johannesburg and Cape Town. Another one just coming up is Calgary and Toronto in Canada, which is fantastic. I'd love to start writing a series of travel books as well. So I've just started on one travel book for Northumberland. So it's combining my love of photography with my love of travel, which is even better because it means I can put my travels through the business as a business expense. So something I want to do is start writing a series of travel books as well, because I do love to travel.
Yeah, so take that, HMRC.
Yeah.
And that's legitimate as well.
Yeah,
Bit cheeky of me, but yeah, it is legitimate. So I know you're inundated with work and appointments and stuff, and thank you for being on the podcast with me today. How can people get in touch with you? Because I know you always want to reach out to people who are genuine. So how can people get in touch?
LinkedIn's a great way to message me, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just I think you probably put the links in the podcast anyway, but Geoff Brown, the photographer's mentor on LinkedIn. You'll see me on Facebook as well. And then my website is www.thephotographersmentor.com. And then I've got my book page as well on Amazon, Geoff Brown.
That's fabulous. Well, listen, thank you for your service. Thank you for your time today with me. It's been absolutely amazing.
Thanks again, Joe. It's been a pleasure to be on.
JoeTeams.com is a resource I have created to fulfill my mission to help 1 million veterans and business entrepreneurs like you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations they deserve. JoeTeams.com is jam-packed full of valuable resources specifically designed to help you on your journey to success. Visit JoeTeams.com now to find out how you can join and start your journey to success immediately. That's JoeTeams.com, JoeTeams, JoeTeams.com. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.